All right. Well, welcome to the show. Matt is not going to be with us tonight. He had something come up, but that's okay. I'm here, and we are with Ben Percy, who is known as a comic writer and a book writer. So, how's it going, Ben?
It's going good. Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, thanks for taking the time out of your. I'm sure it's a busy schedule. It's not like you're not writing, a lot of books, comics and all that. So,
I'm always juggling chainsaws.
well, before we get started talking about the end times omnibus and stuff, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your, career both as a writer and as a writer, of books and comics.
Oh, well, I write across genres and I write across mediums. So currently, I'm over at Marvel writing Deadpool, writing The Punisher, writing Star Wars, Shadow of Maul, writing the new Fantastic Four series set in the Midnight Universe. And I've been writing comics for Marvel or for DC since 2014. But I also have this whole other life as a novelist, as a short story writer, as a journalist, as somebody who writes audio dramas and screenplays. And I find that working across mediums like that and working across genres too, writing horror, writing sci-fi, writing thrillers, writing crime, it keeps me energized at the keyboard. There's always something new and challenging before me.
So, how did you? What is your? How did you get into comic books, and how did you end up wanting to, become a writer?
Well, I grew up in rural Oregon, and it never really occurred to me that I might become a writer. Becoming a writer felt as otherworldly as becoming an astronaut. But I was raised in a family of voracious readers. And my earliest reading experiences were comic books. I don't remember the first novel I read. Maybe it was The Hobbit or The Mouse and the Motorcycle or something like that. But I do remember the first comics that I read. And the experience of going to a gas station or going to a mercantile. I grew up in a town so small that we didn't have a grocery store. We had a mercantile. And my mom depositing me at the base of the spinner rack and telling me to be good while she shopped. And if I was good, and I just sat there reading my way through all the comic books, she would allow me to buy one and bring it home. I never wanted candy. Chocolate and bubble gum meant nothing to me. I just wanted my cape and spandex. That was my the bedrock of my literary mind. Comes from Man Thing, comes from Conan, comes from Spider-Man and the X-Men and everything else that I was putting into my eyeballs back then. I didn't, as I said, want to be a writer. Didn't even dream of being a writer because I grew up in restaurants. I grew up surrounded by ranchers and loggers, and it wasn't really until college when I stepped into my first creative writing classroom that I just felt locked in and recognized that this is what I wanted to do, and I never looked back from there.
Well, first off, I'm a big Star Wars fan, and I love the Star Wars, and I'm waiting for the Shadow of Maul to the prequel to finish up before I actually sit down and watch the cartoon.
Yeah, the show was really fun, and one of the cool things about it was I was able to, read those scripts when they were first being approved by Lucasfilm. I was able to look at the concept art. So I was there on the ground floor as they were, building this thing, and they were really generous in sharing all that while I was figuring out the best way to put together a prequel series. And the other cool thing about it is, when I was talking about writing across genres, this is an opportunity to blend genres. It's a Star Wars story. It's a sci-fi story, but it's also a crime story, and it's set on the planet of Janix, and it's got a Blade Runner quality to it. It's hard boiled. It's noirish.
Definitely, and I like the way you write the comedic beats between the officer and his like robot. Those those are those are nice little beats that help the story.
Whenever you're writing something that's tense, whether that's horror or in this case a thriller, crime story, it's good to have that humor worked in as a pressure valve. You got to make people unclench their jaws now and then.
So let's talk about the end times, the book, the omnibus you're writing, not the end times that we are currently living in. So what was that?
I said it feels that way sometimes, doesn't it?
It does, definitely. So tell us a little bit, because this was a monthly thing that you collaborated with my favorite author, Stephen King, on. Tell us a little bit about it and how it came to be.
Everyone's favorite author, Stephen King. My favorite, Stephen King. Yeah. So I had this itch I wanted to scratch. This idea had been in my head for a while. I wanted to write a novel that was told in the form of a newspaper, and I wanted it to be delivered as a newspaper, which is a logistically complicated proposal. Thankfully, I found a great partner in Bad Hand Books. Doug Morano is the publisher over there. He's become a good friend, and he was ready to take this on. He partnered with a local distributor, and it's in the Midwest, and they have been sending off these newspapers month after month after month. So there's a great element to it in that there's the suspense, right? You have to wait a month between issues, just like with the serialized storytelling of comics. But the way in which it's formatted, right? You're reading a newspaper about this town that's rebuilding itself but faces threats in a post-apocalyptic landscape. You don't know what's going to happen between January and February, between April and May, because there's these big gaps of time where sometimes the shit's about to hit the fan when you come to the end of that issue. And it starts off with Mary Poole. This is 10 years or so after, 13 years to be precise, after the world sort of falls apart and 99% of the population is gone. And so we're sort of out of that moment where everything is perilous. We're in that moment where everybody's starting to rebuild. And Mary decides that the best way that she can contribute to her community, a community where some people are scavenging, some people are farmers or hunters or woodworking, etc. She decides that putting this newspaper together is how she will contribute to a town of North End. So she ends up putting out this paper at first just for herself. It's her voice alone when it kicks off. But over the course of the story, she invites more and more people into the paper, and it becomes almost choral. It becomes this community of voices. And there are dangers lurking in the background, as is obvious when you have somebody like Stephen King involved.
What, he doesn't have things lurking in the background, never.
So the way that he got involved is, I pitched him on a whim. I've known him. I'm not going to say we're best friends, even though I wish we were. But he blurbed a few of my books. We've been in email contact. I interviewed him on stage at a literary festival in Minnesota. So it wasn't me coming at him out of the blue. But the reason that I was thinking specifically of him here is because this is basically the world of The Stand. There's that. Also, I read The Green Mile as a serialized novel when it first came out. Not everybody realized this, but it came out, in these small installments. And I would run to the bookstore on the day they released, and that's how I gobbled it up. And I really wanted to create that same sort of addictive experience for readers. And King has also taken some big swings, experimental forms like writing the bullet or the plant. Those were some early ebooks. experiments. He wrote Carrie, which Carrie is, if you think of the novel, not the movie, Carrie is an epistolary novel. It's mostly composed of newspaper articles and such. So in that, those are all the reasons I laid out for him. And he asked me, a few more questions. And he's like, yeah, I'll contribute. And the way in which he contributed was, and this is really cool and generous of him, he decided his byline would be Claudia Bachman. So Claudia Bachman is Richard Bachman's wife. Richard Bachman is Stephen King's pseudonym, and Claudia Bachman is who he dedicated all those books to. Claudia is also a character in the Dark Tower series. So Claudia, even though her husband died of cancer of the pseudonym, Claudia lives in this post-apocalyptic landscape. So it's really awesome to be able to, rub shoulders with the Kingverse.
Mm-hmm. Now, does the book have the same, I would say, dark edge that the Bachman books tend to have?
Well, I'll say that Claudia has the same dark edge that the Bachman books have.
Okay.
And so does the End Times as a whole.
So, who are the main characters? And so you've mentioned the one. Is there anybody else who becomes a major player in the story? Or
yeah, well, there's Mary. She's the axis around all around which everything spins. But there's also Claudia. There's also characters like Russ Stevenson, who becomes a love interest. There's this colorful cast of characters. There's ice fishermen, there's wood splitters, there's syrup makers, there's hunters like Zeb Wells, who might share a namesake with a comic book. He's a wolf hunter, and he covers himself in wolf skins. And yeah, so there's just this wider cast of characters, all of whom have these unique personalities and positions, and they become voices within the story.
And for the collection, you have somebody writing the introduction for you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Doug Morano, the publisher of Bad Hand Books, he's kind of a mad genius, and he comes up with these really fun swings sometimes. And he said, "I'm going to approach Joe Bob Briggs about this." And I honestly was not sure it would work out. I crossed my fingers and toes, but Joe Bob is kind of a god in my mind. I grew up on Joe Bob. As I mentioned, I grew up in rural Oregon, and I didn't have really anybody else who was wired like me. Like I read Fangoria magazine and Starlog magazine, and I watched Joe Bob. And that's how, through his drive-in theater and through Monster Vision, that's how I discovered a lot of those movies that are now so central to my DNA. I watched like Sleepaway Camp and Toxic Avenger and The Hills Have Eyes 2 and Witchboard and Maniac Cop and Puppet Master first because of Joe Bob. And so the fact that he said yes to Doug. He is writing the introduction to the End Times hardcover. It's not just a dream come true; it's a nightmare come true. Because like two icons, right, from my childhood, I would not have written the End Times if not for them. So it's really special.
Now, sorry. Since this is the first volume, I assume there's going to be more installments going forward.
We'll see. This is a year of storytelling. There's 12 issues, 12 months that go into the End Times Volume 1. Those will be collected, into this hardback edition, which you can order at the Bad Hand Books website right now. It comes out in 2027. The newspaper has been coming out over the course of this year, but they'll be collected in that hardcover in 2027. And we'll have bonus material in there, not just the introduction from Stephen King, from Joe Bob, but also like an essay from me, some bonus material, and it's gonna more stuff to be announced to come. But yeah, it's volume 1 for now. But we could easily continue this into year 2.
Mm-hmm. And so part of the sales from the book are going to a great cause, correct?
Yeah, with the newspaper, we contributed money to the ACLU, in part because it carries into the message of the story, which is that journalism is central, centrally important to us as a society, and journalism wins in the end times. With the novel, for all the pre-orders that go in, we've got money going towards the recovery efforts in Minnesota after the ice incursion, let's call it. So, it was Minnesota was essentially under siege for a while there, and a lot of businesses suffered as a result.
Definitely. Now, in preparation for this interview, not only did I, catch up on the Mall book, but I also, and I hope that Hearst, I found it on Audible, and it was one of your books, and it was a Kindle for you. It was written for Kindle, correct? Originally,
yeah.
And it was.
I wrote that a long time ago. That was probably 14 years ago. I can barely remember that. I hope you liked it.
I did, and it definitely, the ending certainly caught me. The reveal at the end with everything was very fun. So I'm definitely going to be checking out more of your books going forward, because besides comics, and I do a lot of other reading, listening.
Well, if you like audiobooks, and you want my scary voice in your head all day, I ended up narrating the audiobook version of Red Moon, my novel. So, werewolf epic.
So, is there any difference between writing a novel and writing for comics? And is there anything that you've learned from writing novels that you've been able to apply to comics, or vice versa?
Yeah, novels are a marathonic, solitary experience, and comics are a sprint and a collaborative effort. I like having both in my life. I like having something that is all my own and working on that in the dark for many years, but I also love, and I think that the pandemic really drove this home during that sort of isolated period, where I like working with other people, and working with artists, working with a team, working with a penciler, an inker, a colorist, a letterer, working with the editors at Marvel. It's really invigorating, because you're all trying to tell the best story possible. But man, comics moves fast. So you have to be ready to grind away, to answer those 200 emails a day, to be able to juggle a lot of things at once. And, when I think about what I've learned from one medium or the other, I think that every time I jump across mediums, I become a better writer, because I'm sort of discovering new storytelling devices, different, revamping my arsenal. And, with comics, you have 20 pages. You don't have 24 pages. You don't have 18 pages. You have 20 pages. And you have 5 to 7 scenes. Within those 5 to 7 scenes, there's an A plot, a B plot, a C plot, and a D plot. The B plot's probably going to become the A plot of the next issue. The C plot will probably be the B plot. You've got a splash page on page 4 or 5. You got a splash page, maybe it's page 20. There's a constraint to it. And that constraint does not exist in novels. And I found that constraint can actually be inspiring and make you better, make you sharper, make you more efficient. So in writing comics, I've come back to my novels and recognized, I know a better way to do this, a faster way to do this, a sharper way, a triangulated way. And it's almost like I learned math, some sort of calculus from comic book writing that made things all the more clear when it came to the shaggy wilderness of novel writing.
So when you first came into comic book writing, was there a learning curve, coming from novel writing that you had to kind of become familiar with?
Absolutely, yeah. I was thinking about the first comic that I wrote, that was with DC Comics. It was Detective Comics 35 and 36. I was paired with J.P. Leone, the artist, who sadly passed away a few years ago. Left a massive vacancy in the art world. JP was very generous with me because I asked him up front. I was like, JP, I want to keep writing comics. I don't want this to be a one and done. So help me do a better job so that I can, so I can keep going, so that I can be a good collaborator. And JP gave me a lot of advice, but one of the things that stuck with me was he said, like, don't tell me what to do in a prescriptive way. Like, instead, try to write your scripts in such a way, like your short stories or novels, that thrills me, that scares me, lust or anger, that makes me laugh, that makes me scream. He's like, if you can imbue that atmosphere into your comic book scripts, I will get excited by that, and I will try to transfer that into my art. And so rather than bossing your artist around, it really helped me recognize from the very beginning what a collaboration it was, and how you should spend that time and put that care into your scripts in such a way that you're getting your artist and getting your artists excited and feeding them, because then they'll do their best work. So that was part of my learning curve, but also just like there's a rhythm, or as I said, a calculus to comic scripts that takes a while to figure out. At first I wanted to put too much prose on the page in my captions, or at first I wanted to put too many panels on the page, or write too many scenes for too few pages. So, all those things, you just, over time, they become intrinsic, but at first it takes you a lot longer to figure them out.
So when you're, do you have if you're working on a novel and comics, do you have a specific time that you say, okay, right now I'm focusing on my novel, or right now I'm working on comics? Or if you're working on one and you have a idea for the other, do you switch, tracks, or, what's your process, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, it's essential to be able to multitask doing what I do. And I can consider it like a cascading focus, so that, I have usually a notebook beside my desk, right here. I have stuff stuck on the wall right in front of me. I've got stuff stuck on the wall over here in the closet. And even while I'm writing, say, a comic script, there's a comic script for Punisher right in front of me. Even though I'm writing that, I'm thinking about this other thing. I'm thinking about that novel. I'm thinking about that screenplay. And I'm processing them every day and writing on the wall, adding to these, reams of paper, even though I'm concentrating on this script. So it's almost like you walk in the morning with your coffee and you think about these other things, then you get down and you crank away at this comic script, then you step away and you look at this other thing and make some notes, then you come back. But generally speaking, it's important for me to have chunks of time where I'm working on one thing, like, let me bang out this script over a few days, then let me work on this novel for 5 days, then let me work on this other thing, because you get into a zone, and that zone's where you're not even aware of what you're doing. You're just like in the dream. It's similar to what happens when you play sports or play sports well. You just get into that zone where you're swinging at that pitch without really realizing it. That's where I want to be creatively, and that requires deep focus. If you're out there, Chad.
So, no, sorry. I had to take care of the dog. He is barking and wanted to go outside, so I'm back. So talking about the Punisher, how is that coming to that character, which has kind of been, how should I say it, adopted by, the right and kind of bastardized, I guess. How is it, coming, trying to help Marvel reclaim that character?
Well, my response to that is that the skull on Frank's chest belongs to him and him alone. and it represents the pain that's been inflicted on him, and it represents the pain he is inflicting on the world. So it's a skull made of scars. So to me, that's where it's anchored, and that's where I'm going with it.
Okay. I know, a lot of us over at Comic Watch are really enjoying the Punisher run. So,
he's a scary guy.
Are there any, you've written quite a few characters. Are there any that you haven't had the chance to work with that you would like to play in that sandbox, I guess?
Oh, of course. I mean, it's something I think about all the time. I'd love to write Conan one day. I'd love to write Daredevil, Hulk, Captain America. I mean, I have like a John Le Carré version of Captain America I'd like to write. I'd love to be, to have a longer run in Batman, Swamp Thing, Constantine. There's loads of characters to write. I never thought I'd get the chance, to write characters like Spider-Man or the Fantastic Four. I'm really grateful that these opportunities came up where I was able to do like the horror version of them. Like they'd never let me write an Amazing Spider-Man because I'm too evil for that. But the fact that I was able to write Predator versus Spider-Man, then I was able to do the gory, nasty Shadow Soak version of it. And the same thing's going on with Midnight Fantastic Four. Like the first family is, I absolutely love the Fantastic Four, but it's probably the standard version of them probably isn't right for me. But this version, cosmic horror version, that's right up my alley.
It definitely sounds like it's going to be very exciting and something to look forward to later this summer.
Yeah, well, as of the recording of this podcast, a press release is going out. So keep your eyes out tonight on some more news about it.
I just got the notification on my watch while we were talking, but I haven't read it. So
yeah, well, there's a really exciting Kev Walker cover for Midnight Fantastic Four 1 in there, among other juicy tidbits.
So, do you ever envision having the end times translated to comics, or would you just prefer that it stay the way it currently is?
Oh, that's an interesting question. There are comics in it. My friend Matt Bowers, he writes a cartoon script for the end times, and he does it in a really cool woodcut design because that's the way a printing press would replicate comics. He also does maps for it, and he designed the masthead, and he's doing some portraits for it too for the people in the town. But a comics version of it would probably be equivalent to a filmic version of this as well, an adaptation of this, where it wouldn't be about the medium of the paper so much as watching the people who are doing the reporting, making the paper. So it would be more of an outside view as opposed to this sort of found artifact.
And, while we're talking hypotheticals, is there a particular artist that you feel would be, a perfect fit for a project like that?
Oh, I mean, I've worked with some geniuses, but I will say that, probably the artist who I've really jived with the most and who we have a mind meld together is Joshua Cassara.
Okay.
He's become one of my best pals. So I'm always eager to join forces with him.
Now, back to Star Wars and having dabbled in that you have dabbled in that universe. Are there any characters that maybe you haven't written yet that you would like to take a shot at?
Oh man, I mean, I will say this: I have a Star Wars novel I want to write. I'm not going to say what it's about, but let's just say it's an espionage book. So Star Wars espionage. I do have a horror story I want to write in the Star Wars universe as well. This would be a comic series, the horror story. But when it comes to characters, I mean, I want to write Darth Vader. I'd love to write, some of the core cast from the first four films. First three films is late in that. So.
Well, you also got to write the first issue of the Rogue One one shots with Cassian Andor.
I grew up on episodes 4 through 6, but as an adult, and I have like a deep, abiding love for them. But as an adult, like Andor and Rogue One have become my favorite Star Wars stories. So it's really cool to be able to, write that one shot for the anniversary of Rogue One.
And I like how it fits perfectly in between season 2 of Andor, which was kind of hard to watch during the time it was released, given everything. And then how it leads right up to the first moments of the movie.
It was hard to watch, but you know what? That Uprising episode, I feel like that's one of the best episodes of television ever made.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, just the grittiness of it and the political undertones. I just think that's grade A entertainment. And the way that they took the Force out of it all, more or less.
Yeah, I mean,
more like the industrial side of Star Wars and the political machinations of Star Wars. I really, really admire Andor.
It was great, because when you think of Star Wars, you think of, like you said, the Force and lightsabers and all that. But you can see Andor is proof that you can tell a story without that in that universe.
Yeah. Rogue One led the way.
So, given what you know now about writing novels and comics, if you had the chance to tell your younger self something or give your younger self advice, would you, and what would it be?
Oof. Well, I don't think, not in my wildest dreams, what I imagine I would have the opportunity to do what I'm doing right now. As I mentioned before, it wasn't even on my radar that I could become a writer. So it just feels so extraordinary to be able to put a dent in these universes and to be the custodian of some of these characters. And I try to remember that every day when I sit down at the desk to feel that gratitude. So, all I would say to little Ben Percy is like, keep putting all that weird shit in your brain. Because that's the stew that's going to give rise to this imagination. Even though other people thought I was a total weirdo, reading Mad Magazine and Fangoria and watching Night of the Creeps and having a Conan figurine by my bedside and whatever else, like Aliens posters on the walls, like Dungeons and Dragons manuals filling my bookshelves, like it. Despite being a bit of an outlier as a kid, like that was all an important part of my education. And to never feel any sort of shame for it.
Definitely. Well, as we wrap up here, why don't you give a pitch for the End Times Volume 1 and everything else that you're working on now?
Sure. I mean, just in summary, The End Times is a short novel told in the form of a newspaper, a post-apocalyptic newspaper. And, over the course of 12 months, you see how the town of North End and how its citizens transform. Mary Poole, who's the center of the story, the main writer and editor, she will form a literal family and a found family of her own through the paper, but also defend her community and battle mis and disinformation and threats that might topple everything that they're building. So that's the story. Stephen King is a contributor. I hope you'll check it out. Again, you can order it right now at the Bad Hand Books website. As for other stuff I've got going on, I mean, I've already talked about all the Marvel comics. There is something that's secret that I can't talk about with Marvel comics. I will say I have 2 creator-owned books that will be announced soon.
Ooh.
One will probably be announced in San Diego, and the other one will probably be announced at New York Comic Con. I'm working on an audio drama right now, a sci-fi thriller that's really exciting. We're recording it presently. That'll be announced probably in the next month or two. Super excited about that. I'm writing a movie, and I cannot tell you what the movie is, but it's with one of the big studios. And yeah, I've got other stuff coming down the pipeline, so I'm keeping busy, and I'm having the time of my life.
Well, it sounds like I will probably see you at New York Comic Con this year again.
Yeah, come hang out.
Yeah. And where can people find you on social media if you're brave enough to be on there?
I am on social media. I hate it. I'm not very good at it, but you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Blue Sky. It's it's whatever. There's pictures of my dog and some stuff about comics, but I'm not a social media giant for sure.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time this evening to chat with us about the end times and your comic work. And maybe, as we, once some of those announcements are made, we can have you back so you can talk to us about that and, more about the Fantastic Four Midnight series, if possible.
All right. And thanks everybody who's listening out there for checking out my stuff. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, as my co-host likes to remind everybody that the world at this time can be a pretty crappy place, but it doesn't have to be. So go out, do something good for someone, support local art, support local businesses. Just don't be a jerk.